Okay, hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michael Tucker, and want to welcome you to the November edition of the Mug Roundup session. We do this once a month, and basically, this is an opportunity to be able to recap all of the different Marketo User Group content that's coming up inside of the Marketo User Group community. And it's a good way, if you're a busy marketer, to be able to spend 1 hour of your time and get a recap on all of the sessions that are happening throughout the Marketo User Group community. So with me now, I have my co-host, Mr. Warren Stokes from the lovely country of England.
Hey guys, let's keep it short and sweet.
Absolutely. And then we have a wonderful panel of different people that are coming in with us today. So really grateful to see all of the different speakers that have joined us in the Mug Leaders from throughout the year. So today we have three different people. Mr. Paul Wilson, who's really on the forefront of the Marketo Virtual User Group community. Paul, when did you start the MS Dynamics Mug? That was like 2017, 2016, something like that?
Yeah, it was 2016, indeed. So it's been a while.
A lot of changes since then. And what's the current status of that Marketo User Group? You're still doing meetings?
We've not had meetings in quite a while. There's been some heavy distractions for me as the lead, but the intention is now that Adobe is very squarely moving in the direction of moving to Dynamics ourselves, we'll be picking those back up hopefully within January, February timeframe.
Okay, great. Well, we're really glad to have you with us, of course. And you know, the stuff that you produced back in 2016 has really been an inspiration and a cornerstone to what we're doing today in the virtual user group community. So thank you for that.
So you're saying I was kind of ahead of that whole 2020 curve. I knew that the virtual universe was coming. So
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Our next guest, really a perennial favorite to the Roundup, Mr. Trent Cross, a huge supporter of the groups. Thank you so much for everything that you've done for the community as a whole, Trent, and really glad to have you on here again as well from Salt Lake City and all the stuff that you and Andrew are doing with your mug as well.
Glad to be here. Glad to be here. And I can't believe Paul says he's busy. So that's all I got to say.
And then our third guest is really the co-leader of the New York Marketo User Group, and he and last month his co-host Inga Romanoff was with us, but really want another cornerstone of our community. So we're really excited for this session, Mr. Sanford Whiteman. And Sandy, thank you so much for coming, and appreciate you sharing your insights week over week and everything that you're doing inside of the Marketing Nation community, obviously with your technical expertise. So thanks for coming on here. I think you might be muted, but anyway, Sandy's here. So
double mute.
Oh,
I was on double. I had mic mute. Double. Yes. Hello. Thank you. Yes, hello and thank you.
Awesome. So really glad to have you guys in here. So we'll go through this format. I think, Trent's been on this before, but for everybody who hasn't seen this before, basically what we're doing, one of the things we notice with everything going virtual is if you look at them at a given month on the Marketo User Group calendar, there's a lot of different Marketo User Group sessions, a lot of really passionate Marketo advocates and Marketo practitioners who are sharing their knowledge. And altogether, like in this last month in November, for example, 19 user group meetings, not counting the weekly sessions that Sanford and Inga put on, you're looking at 19 to 28 and a half hours of Marketo user groups, which is a lot. Warren and I have been crisscrossing the world, attending all these different Marketo user groups. And we thought, well, wouldn't it be great to be able to kind of summarize these into a quick spot so all the marketers who are really busy can quickly watch this session, look at the ones that they want to attend or maybe missed, and then go back to either those mugs and sign up as members or watch the recordings. So to that end, we also built a YouTube channel, again, with Adobe's blessings, and really created an area where we summarize all of the content, and all of those recordings are in one spot. So I've created a quick redirect to it. It's conversionstore.com/video, and it really just takes you to YouTube. So if you go to YouTube and search for Marketo Virtual User Groups, you'll get a channel that has, basically playlists for every single user group. So there's a Salt Lake City playlist. There's a manufacturing playlist for the Marketo User Group that I run, and there's one for Chicago, for Auckland, New Zealand, and so all of that content is all into one spot. And anything that you're trying to learn inside of Marketo really can be found through all of the different content that exists on that one YouTube channel over the last 3 to 4 years. So please stop by, and then if you're interested in any of these sessions that we're talking about, that's a great place to go on to. We'll talk a little bit about some of the upcoming events that are happening here. And one thing that we want to make note of is Adobe Summit. So we're recording this on December the 1st of 2020. And today is actually the deadline for the new presenters that'll be putting forward submissions to present for Adobe Summit 2021. And so just a note about this is usually where perennially we would get together and I'll get into a convention hall either in San Francisco or in Las Vegas and share Marketo best practices, and it's a great place for community. And obviously that's not possible now, but one thing that has been coming out of this, it's been born out of this whole pandemic, has been the ability to go virtual on this. So for April the 13th to the 15th, block that off in your calendars now. Marketo Summit, Adobe Summit, keep saying that, will be virtual, and so you'll be able to view it from the pleasure of your offices or your home office. And also there's no cost to it. So what normally would have been $2,000 to attend an event, and plus your plane ticket plus your hotel, that's all included. And so you'll hear experts from across the Adobe ecosystem talking a little bit about some of the different developments that are happening on here. Paul or Trent, are either of you participating in that? Are you submitting? Sandy, I think you're submitting a proposal to speak at this, right?
I am. I am. Yes, certainly. I will have it done. I will have it done by midnight tonight. Actually, I don't think I am, but
okay.
Thanks for letting me know about it.
just wondering.
I've been busy, but yeah.
You know, what have any of you thought about submitting? Any thoughts that in terms of what you want to talk about, or what's a good topic that would come up during Summit this year? Or next year, I should say.
What would I talk about if I could? Oh, geez. I could do a whole session on forms, both how they really work, how they used to work, and how they've changed, because there's been some dramatic stuff this week. But that could be so many options, Michael.
Lots of different.
Yeah.
They're usually a cross section though of Adobe products and then Marketo and other themes around that to be able to discuss. So if you're interested, go to summit.adobe.com and you'll see all the details on that. Okay, and then really we just want to dive right into it. So really what we do is we really just take a look at here's all of the different Marketo user groups that happen in the month of November. And so we want to be able to kind of pull up themes and then just talk a little bit about them. And if you're interested, again, check out the YouTube channel, sign up on mugs.marketo.com, and you can attend some of the upcoming events. So we'll show that on the next slide. But for now, we really just want to do kind of a quick 20 minutes and then just kind of recap some of these different events. And so, let's start off by going to you, Sandy, about what you and Inga are doing, and just kind of, I've highlighted it in red because I think it's a continual series, and it's also kind of you really provide value to everybody who just has a quick Marketo question and just wants to get an answer to it right away. So could you talk a little bit about your office hours and kind of how that came about and kind of what you do in half an hour?
Yeah, well, in New York, getting space to rent or get donated to do the in-person mug meetings was becoming kind of a chore even 2 years ago. So while we would still schedule them, every month, maybe a couple of months, as Elliot knows, he used to come to them. Sorry to call you out, but I also wanted to say great beard. So anyway.
Likewise.
So that became... already we had a concern that maybe we needed to meet both more often and in more agile fashion. So we started doing this virtual thing. I think it was a whole hour every week, and that turned out, at the time at least, to be too much. the attendance was consistent and still is, Michael, as you know, because you've been coming along. But it's a core group. We really could use a lot more people. I think a lot more if people knew about it, which is why it's so great that we're here today. If people knew about it, we could easily double or triple the attendance without giving the actual number. Let's just say double or triple wouldn't be too many. And still be able to field questions and inform other people as they listen to the questions and answers other people have. So yeah, we trimmed it down from an hour to half an hour last year, and it's been quite successful and consistent. We get a core group of people from the New York area, but also from Connecticut and Boston, and of course it's open to anybody, which is why we're talking about it today. Inga has a lot of experience on the RevOps side. I'm, as everybody knows, specialized on the technical side. So I'd say the questions, across the two of us, probably tilt toward me more of the time, just because somebody's having like a point in time, crisis over something technical in Marketo, or the under the hood stuff in Marketo. But we'll answer any questions and discuss any questions we have. And of course, we have, attendees like Michael and others who, if you're the informal contract is if you're on video, you can also answer questions and participate. So people usually do hide out behind the black square, but if you're, you can basically be a co-host if you come on board and go on video. So we're really that inviting. But really, like Michael said, any questions are welcome, and the more the merrier. It's not a New York area, you got to ask New York questions or anything like that. So whatever that would even mean.
With a thick New York accent.
Right. You have to do either Bronx or Queens. Actually, you can't do Brooklyn's easy. I can do that. That's where I'm from. But you have to do it. Anyway, yeah.
If you go in there and ask what's a good slice of pizza, that's not the question you're looking for.
Right. No. But, come on board, and, if you get involved also in that little community, and we do resume physical meetings, of course, anybody's welcome when we, in those blissful days when we'll finally, rent out the second floor of a, company somewhere and have a big in-person meeting. So come on down.
I was going to ask about that as well. It's not recorded either, so I kind of feel when it's not recorded, people feel more comfortable asking about those kind of questions that they don't normally ask. I mean, even I bought Adrian Fraguela, and he developed the Chrome extension, and also he had played with your Agicol, and he was able to come to that meeting from the UK, and he, on the back of that, he was able to develop some really cool stuff. And just because you were able to answer a very specific technical question that would be a bit lengthy over the community, and you were able to just answer that straight away, and that was like, he really appreciated that.
I think one of the things too that I see that's been born out of this format, and a mug that came up. So we're talking about the first line in this column, but then also at the last one, I stayed up late and I went to the Auckland mug, and Grace Brebner and Josh Pickles, who was on this show a little while ago, have started doing their very first office hour. Specifically, there's a good base of people that are on the other side of the world from where I am. Warren, you're on another hemisphere as well too, right? So, it's great to kind of see them set that up, and I love talking to them. I love interacting with them. They're very giving hosts, and also very knowledgeable, and kind of have that same sort of kind of parity between them that you and Inga have, Sandy. That so their first session was really a really nice one. It was kind of the same sort of numbers, where it's really about maybe half a dozen, maybe a little bit more than that, people that were in them, but a really open discussion. And it was really very much, I think a lot of people were relatively new to Marketo. We had a couple of Eloqua migrations that had come into that conversation. And so it was very much, okay, well, where do I go now? The platform's set up. I have 8 different directions that I could go, which is the right direction. And so to kind of your mention, Sandy, about, kind of you handle the technical side. What I love when I talk to Inga about it is she has, kind of that people interaction side of things with the consulting that she's doing, where she'll kind of bring to the table, hey, we ran into this or that, or we had this interaction with the sales team, and here's how we balance the marketing versus sales conversation, and kind of that, there's an intangible people factor to this line of work as well too, that I think it's that you don't really appreciate until you're actually in it and you come up with some of those challenges and how to get over those. So, another thing that I see on here, and maybe this is something that opens up discussion for all of us, just looking at, so we see a lot of roundtables that are kind of coming up here. So I see Montreal had one. Indianapolis was an interesting one where we had it turned into kind of just an open forum with Blaine and Brennan and I kind of talking from NAC, kind of talking about software development altogether. And I thought that was interesting. And then also Raleigh, Durham. So always have, the meetings that are in Raleigh, Durham were really interesting. And they were talking again about third-party cookies and how to adjust those and kind of to migrate those to first-party cookies, and kind of what's happening from that standpoint. Paul and Sandy and Trent, anybody on the panel, have you started approaching this with your different instances about how to address this third-party cookie situation? And can you talk a little bit about some of those challenges that are coming forward?
I guess throwing that over to Sanford first, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
I was waiting for Trent and Paul.
Everyone's being too polite.
Yeah, I feel very new. Absolutely have started to look at what we can do. And, really it's going to start with what we can't do, primarily in Safari and iOS Safari. Marketo's Munchkin cookie is a first-party cookie, technically, but it's what's informally called a first-party cookie in a third-party context, meaning that even though it actually is set, I mean, this is going to be highly technical for people, but I'm going to answer your question, Michael. What that means is you have to bridge the gap, and you have to convince the browser that it's closer to a first-party cookie than a third-party cookie. And the key is to make sure, first of all, a fundamental marketing objective of engagement. The more people engage with your site, literally, the more the browser will remember that cookie is one that is important. So it's become something that, instead of just tracking after the fact that your marketing efforts have been successful, it has now started to act in reverse, if you will. The more success you have as a marketer driving people to your pages that use Munchkin tracking, the more the browser will round up and consider that cookie to be important to the ecosystem. So that's something that was never the case before the last couple of years when Apple first introduced ITP. But yeah, we definitely started to look at it. I don't want to get into the weeds of technical stuff, but hey, join the New York Mug and we can talk about it. I would love to have people ask questions like that. That's exactly what we're there for. Like Michael said, someone can throw in a question like that. That's, kind of low level, almost code level question. And then someone else will come in who's just a newbie to Marketo and say, what's the difference between a smart campaign and a smart list? And the cool thing about the mug, if I can just go back to plugging the idea, Michael, of the mug as a whole, is on the Marketo community, where I'm the moderator, as most everybody knows, certain super simple questions can be frustrating and can make me, I'm just speaking editorial, it can be like, that's a question that really can't be answered in text. I think Michael alluded to that a few minutes ago. It's just going to take a wall of text, and in a lot of ways, sometimes the answer might be seen to be in the Marketo doc, so it can be frustrating in that level. However, once you have an interaction, like the casual and unrecorded, as Martin mentioned, nature of our VMUG in New York, it becomes a lot easier to ask just any old question, whether it be kind of a breezy top-level question or a deep question. It doesn't really matter. There's not as much at stake, I think. And I love to be the moderator in the Marketo community, and please, everybody, keep asking questions there. But it's true that there's a certain kind of super simple or super hard question that doesn't really work there because it takes so much back and forth. The thread becomes so long, the post becomes so long, and I think it's really great for an informal discussion instead.
would also say if you're going to ask Sanford a question on the community or tag him in there, don't screenshot your code. I've noticed that that's a pet hate of yours as well.
Oh, do not like that.
Uh,
Do not like that at all.
Among other things.
Yes, exactly.
Trent, I guess same question. What's your kind of preparation? What are you doing on the clients on the Red Pulse side in preparation for that?
No, that's a great point. What Sandy was talking about and stuff. I think is still trying to. I think everybody's trying to figure out kind of what does that really mean. And I appreciate Sandy's point, just that it actually makes a heck of a lot of sense, right, in regards to kind of having to drive more traffic along those lines. So I think that's the big piece of it. I mean, I haven't had a lot of the clients and people start talking about it yet. I mean, it's been hard conversations, but it really hasn't been kind of a top of mind conversation at the moment. But I think everybody's trying to digest it and figure out kind of what does it really mean from a kind of a tactical perspective, and then kind of what does that look like in regards to then how does it impact, the programs and processes and, successes of campaigns and elements along those lines, and how you track that from that perspective. So that's kind of where we're at the moment that I'm seeing.
Okay, let's, for the sake of time, so I've noticed there's themes in the rest of this, so I'm going to keep pulling back to this here, but in the rest of the calendar, you'll notice that there's a large number of sessions that we're covering off updates to the Marketo UI. So Houston did one. There is an update that I think happened. Where is it? There's about 4 or 5 of them actually that happened over the last couple of weeks. And then Trent, you did one as well too, and I like how you have these Marketo shorts as well too. So could you talk a little bit about what is a Marketo short, and and then what is the UI? What kind of discussions are you seeing coming from the UI side of things?
Yeah, so I think, so Marketo short, so, we're trying to come up with something that provides some low value. So what we've decided is have kind of these, over the last 2 or 3 sessions that we did, we decided to say, hey, kind of what can we do to provide additional value within this hour? It doesn't feel like people are just basically being, PowerPointed to death, right? From that perspective. So we've gone more kind of like panel discussions, kind of conversational, kind of like we're doing today. Yeah. Which is great. I think can provide some different levels of interaction. And the Marketo Shorts basically is that just to do 2 or 3 quick tips and tricks. And I call them tips and tricks basically that you may know or you may not know or you may have known and you forgot, right? Going back to kind of some of Sandy's points in regards to kind of what the mugs are all about, right? There, you get a whole variation of people that participate in these mugs across the board, and from brand new users to people that have been using Marketo for multiple years, right? And sometimes we forget things, that we've been using stuff from that standpoint. So really what the shorts are, just quick, one down and dirty, one slide. Here's a tip trick, like for instance, one we talked about, like the campaign inspector, right? Some people use it, some people don't. Some people are like, oh, I didn't know that this is all the stuff you can do. I mean, things like that, or something around the tokens, or something really simple along those standpoints. So that's kind of what we did for this, kind of add some additional value or kind of little tips, more than that. I'll call them Marketo shorts. So it really takes like 30 seconds to slide. Not a lot of details behind it. So, and then when we did the UI stuff, we actually had 3 of our members who had their instances migrated over to the new Marketo UI. We then kind of talk about some of the practicality and kind of their day-to-day usage of the good, the bad, the ugly. Kind of what they found was really interesting and kind of insightful, things that kind of made their lives a little bit better, and also ones that they had to have some challenges to try to do some additional learning processes, right? So it was really interesting to kind of get different perspectives from 3 different individuals from 3 different organizations and companies, and 2 of the 3 basically, they woke up one day and logged into Marketo, and voila, they had the new UI running in front of them. The other one knew about it about a week in advance. So, but yeah, it was a good conversation, good discussion.
Yeah, I see a lot of those that are kind of coming up as well, and so kind of neat to see that happening. one of the other themes that I see here, I see that the Austin mug and also the Brisbane, Australia mug had sessions that were based around nurture programs. So can we all talk a little bit about from a nurture program perspective, and sort of how do you see that conversation kind of happening from a lot of it was kind of introduction to nurtures, but can we talk a little bit more about kind of unorthodox ways that you might have used a nurture program in the past? What are some of the more creative ways that you've seen historically about how to take an engagement program, build it out, and apply that to a different Marketo instance? And just throw that out to everybody.
I mean, I can jump in to start. I always had an issue with the engagement program in the sense that they're too simple. So to give you an example, we did some nurtures based on telemetry data of a product. So you're kind of training them automatically through Marketo, and as a result, you get usage data back from that you can use to then target on. That was quite an interesting thing, but we couldn't necessarily do that so easily from an engagement program. I always find that kind of is somewhat limiting unless it's very linear, what you're trying to do. I mean, maybe like Trent, what are your thoughts on?
Yeah, I obviously, I love engagement programs. I think there's some about, I kind of like the way that they provide the stuff. Of course, the ways that you can actually, can embed programs inside of the streams, right, which kind of gives some additional functionality capabilities, which makes it really robust, and you kind of do some trickery in regards to timing elements along those lines. I participated actually in the Austin user group, and actually Amanda Thomas was talking about the nurture tracks and process along those lines, and they choose with Itmos, and they actually have they have a kind of a structure of approach to kind of how they kind of help their clients in regards to bringing on board nurture programs across the board, right? And I think it was very insightful for those that are trying to either move beyond the typical batch and blast and then the program standpoint, but kind of move on to kind of the engagement programs, kind of what do you look at, how do you create that journey and that pathing across the board. And so I find engagement programs really great if you start to kind of create a kind of a storyline in regards to kind of what you're trying to do and accomplish in regards to a subset of customers, and with kind of similar types of interests and values along those lines, and moving across the different pieces of the puzzle, right? So I mean, it's I find that the engagement approach can be really robust, and it can be very simple. But I think the power in the engagement program is really just kind of what are you going to create this journey in regards to this kind of this message, the story for these different individuals.
Mm-hmm. How, is that what were some of the main takeaways that you got? So I wasn't at the Austin one, but would love to kind of hear some of the takeaways that you got from Amanda specifically on those.
Yeah, I mean, I won't steal her thunder and stuff, because that way we can force everybody to go and watch it, right?
Yeah.
So, but I think, some of the key things they had, right? I mean, she talked about, just kind of creating, they had some, the tried and true, the kind of the spreadsheet process, right? That the lovely tool that we all love and hate. But to create kind of the different elements and kind of the content in regards to different messaging that you're trying to structure. So in other words, kind of create this board of information and kind of what that story is going to look like. And so it's really kind of documented in the spreadsheet, and then kind of understand kind of where you're trying to move people from one section to the other, and that that process that they have in place allows you to kind of visually see, okay, where I'm at with my content, where I'm at with that kind of how do I move people along this path and the structure. And then of course it also shows gaps in regards to kind of where you might be missing content, right? Because we all know that marketing automation is a content hog, and it's just you'll eat up every content you have, and so you got to make sure you have enough to kind of create that storyline across the board. And I think that was kind of one of the key pieces of the puzzle that I saw that Amanda was shared in regards to kind of really map it out, structure it out, write it out, kind of create kind of this flow in regards to, like I said, in the spreadsheet, kind of where things are at. That way you can document it out and say, okay, hey, this is kind of where we're, kind of what we're going to try to do before you start trying to do the build, right? So kind of create the architecture and the kind of foundation before you start doing the build.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of the things that I always like when Amanda's talking about this is how she has these streams that allow you to kind of speed up the cadence if, depending on how people are responding, right? And that adaptive part of Marketo seems like to be a big piece of that. So, would love to kind of dive into that a little bit more so. And then, I know we have Elliot on on here with us as well too. So just kind of want to just throw that to you for us just a moment, Elliot, and just kind of talk a little bit about your process, and then from a data standpoint, what you build into your engagement programs, and kind of how you take your approach on that.
Sure. So one of the, I think, underutilized features that I've seen in consulting with various folks is the transition rules. I've seen people use one engagement program where your streams are different geos or different industries, and in my mind, or in my practice, and Trent and Sanford, to the extent you've seen this, you can comment as well. I mean, I believe that the real power of the engagement program is in those transition rules to progress people into different content at different paces as they indicate it generates signs of interest in moving faster or progressing in the buyer's journey. And I like to make sure that our marketing content people build in what I call off ramps in our emails that go out in each stream, so that at any point in time, if they click on a particular link, to us, that's a tell that they're ready to advance to either a faster pace or a more advanced discussion because they're further along in the buyer's journey.
Yeah, those are really good points. Go ahead, Warren.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, that's a great point. And I was going to ask Sanford as well, like, we've kind of heard some varying discussions on the nurtures, but have you managed to do anything that you thought kind of was super interesting, like beyond the typical UI with nurture streams? Was there anything that you felt was really kind of creative there, Sanford?
Well, we tend to plug in, what is going on with my camera? I can't even tell you. But anyway, it's fun.
Unfortunately,
like,
we can see you.
Like an old-fashioned film.
It's really awesome camera, but it just, anyway, I digress. Anyway, we often plug in, as one might imagine, our tool Flow Boost, which is a webhook-based, hyper-powered way to extend Marketo flows. When you have a nested smart campaign, you can take advantage of those additional ingredients. Likewise, if you're not using built-in transition rules, but using a separate, smart campaign to transition people between streams, you can also take advantage of all of these extra things. So much of the time when we're building out a smart campaign that uses Flow Boost, for example, the person is going to end up dropping that into their engagement program. That's not necessarily like the level at which we're building it out, but is intended to be used in that context to make advanced transition decisions, for example. I mean, really, to Michael's point, and the idea of it's still about planning. To me, one of the mistakes I think people make, and everyone's probably learned from this, is trying to work only within the Marketo UI, thinking, okay, we've got the place to do it. Why not do it right here? Our streams are here. We can drop content in, and thinking I'm going to both plan and execute within Marketo. And it's just not going to work. You have to be able to abstract and express that engagement program logic offline in some way, whether it be spreadsheet or back in the old days of a whiteboard, screenshots of a whiteboard or whatever. It's like, to me, anywhere but building it in there first is a good idea. So many of our clients here don't really even know what an engagement program is. It's another thing I've just to kind of, this is a direct answer to your question, Mark, because this is more like not using it. But I see clients moving down the road thinking we're not using EPs, we're doing something wrong, or we're going to get our budget ripped out because we're using Marketo just to send email blasts. So we have to use engagement programs in order to prove the worth of the platform. And much as I like to use every feature in Marketo or know how to use every feature in Marketo, sometimes it just doesn't fit. so, I mean, I guess that's sort of an answer that's not an answer, but planning with the right person who tells you when not to use something, I think, is really important. That's something that we get into, just to kind of loop this all back. I'm trying to bring it, segue back, right, to what we do in the mug here in New York, and I presume everywhere else, is when you have a chance for that free form question, you can stop someone who's a newbie, and you can say, well, actually, that thing doesn't really work, or that feature is not going to fit for you, or Michael's really good when he's on the calls of pointing out that's probably not good for your industry. Maybe it is, but it sounds like from your industry profile that feature may never work for you, or from your buyer's journey may never work for you. So I think those things are really important. As a consultant, we can't afford, I don't think anyone, with their video on right now, can afford to not know how something works in Marketo. But day-to-day, even power user of Marketo, I think definitely needs to not try to do everything at once. Sometimes that's, maybe I'm getting into the weeds, but like the penalty, if you will, of having a full-time job as a power Marketo admin is you really can't use everything in Marketo, and that's a good thing, because when you try to force your company down that road to use I'm not saying the DPs are like a super deep feature, but they're just a feature that I don't think every Marketo instance needs to turn on. So again, just all about information and planning and so on.
Do you think it's largely to do with the problem that you're trying to deal with, and whether then Nurture Stream fixes that problem? Like, if
Right.
this basic understanding of the feature, does that then meet your business needs? And even if you don't fully understand Nurture Streams, if you can figure it out straight away and whether it fixes that business problem, I think that is kind of one way to maybe look at that as well.
Yeah, I don't know if everyone knows this expression. I use it sometimes on the community, the XY problem. I was going to write a blog post about it at some point to try to be nicer about it than most people, but if I can just finish the thought. The XY problem, usually expressed rather rudely, or defined rather rudely online, is the idea of asking about a solution instead of asking about a problem. So when someone says, my engagement program isn't working, it won't do, goal Y, and you go, wait, what's business objective X? Were you even supposed to be using engagement programs for that? Did you leap into the assumption that you should be using it, and then you're saying engagement programs don't work, and you actually chose the wrong tool or the wrong feature within the tool to do it? Getting people to understand the XY problem is it's kind of like a hopeless cause perhaps, but it's one of my objectives. Just saying, don't ask a question about something you've already assumed you have the solution, but you don't. Let's widen the question. Ask people who know,
In terms of that as well, I noticed that one of the most versatile features, at least in my opinion, is the tokens. That's a really powerful part of Marketo. And on the 16th of November, there was a great session. Christina Ziniga presented at. She did a really great session on the tokens, and it was there's some really good tips in terms of efficiency gains there. So that would be a situation where it's not necessarily a business problem, but it's a specific gain that you'd get as a business to be able to turn around things more quickly, more efficiently. There's perhaps gains in terms of things that you would then have to check. I'm kind of curious, particularly from our speakers, just a quick top 3 things they've seen used with tokens they've thought that's really creative. I'm just kind of curious on your perspectives on that. I kind of want to, what's your thoughts, Trent, on that? The top 3 things, if you had to pull out 3 things and kind of tokens you've thought. I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot a little bit, but that's what I'm here to do, right?
Top 3 things, huh? Let me count the ways, right? Oh boy. I love tokens, right? So obviously I'm a lazy man at heart, right? So if I can find the easiest way to do something, I'll try to figure that out. And obviously tokens is one way to make things that are hard, make them easier. So that's a good thing. I think some of the things that I see that with tokens is that people they understand kind of the powers that they have. I think that's some of the kind of the challenges that people think. They kind of use it for like one-off type of scenarios versus kind of like on a global level. So they understand you can use things at a global level. That you could actually use tokens even down to creating, maintaining your UTM parameters, right? Just so your consistency across the board, so people don't screw those things up, right? From that standpoint for tracking. So, yeah, I think there's, not to say there's a top 1, 2, or 3, but I think there's just variations to understand kind of where they're at by, obviously using it to maintain consistency in different areas. I've seen and have been part of some clients where basically their whole email template is one large set of tokens. And so if you look at the template itself, it's nothing but tokens and it looks horrendous. It's terrible looking, but then obviously when it's generated out with all the tokens and the values, it's a beautiful looking piece of information and content and stuff, but they've taken it down to that level, right? Also down to tokens, down to the different languages and the localization statuses along those lines, right? So I mean, you can be really, really robust or very light with it, but the top piece of advice, just use them, right? I mean, I think I think that's kind of the biggest piece that I would recommendation. Start off and use them and put them at the highest level of your folder, so that way you can use them, so the cascade down, and then start to play around with them. So.
I want to I was in that session too, and I like what you mentioned. That point about using a token for a UTM parameter was a big tip that was really good. So you have HTTPS : a token for the domain name, the question mark, and then another token for your UTM parameter afterwards. And I thought that was kind of a neat way to do it, rather than just having one token for the entire URL. You kind of lose something in that process from a tracking perspective. And then I think the other thing too, Daryl Alfonso Daryl and Christina and I were joking around on that. So Daryl Alfonso from AWS and former LA Mug leader was there. And was just talking a little bit about trying to scale out, right, as your team is growing as well too, right? That ability to be able to quickly make changes to different values and then have those cascade down and kind of populate and inherit to the other instances is a big takeaway really for a lot of those for using tokens as well too. And so we see a lot of that in a lot of the different types of content. So would highly recommend them from that standpoint. All right, go ahead.
I was going to say, I also really liked what you said, Trent, about just kind of use it and just really play around with it. I kind of want to ask, I mean, it was sort of loaded towards velocity scripting, and we couldn't not have Sanford on the call and ask about that, right? But I should have asked Trent as well, like your favorite things as opposed to top. But I do want to ask Sanford there, in reference to what Trent said, like what is that kind of creative process from your perspective of why would you script for something, and at what point would you turn to a script as opposed to do it another method? What's your creative process behind some of the scripting there?
Well, what a lot of people don't realize, I don't know if anyone watched my MopsCon talk from whenever that was, a couple of months ago. What a lot of people don't realize is that certain things cannot be done safely without using Velocity Script. So one of my early slides I mentioned, you can't really put program name, the curly brace program.name token, just in a URL in Marketo. You can't even put email address or first name or last name just in a URL in Marketo. And yet I will guarantee that 9 out of 10 Marketo instances have tried something like that over time. You can't do that because they're not properly encoded for use in a URL. So you immediately, frankly, even things that seemingly don't need velocity to do them safely across your entire database, you need to be using velocity to encode the first name, last name, email address, any other field on the lead to make sure that it can be attached to a URL. Similarly, ideas like, just sort of free-form use of the campaign.name token as the UTM campaign, you also can't really do that safely because it's not encoded correctly. Now, Marketo isn't going to come out and say don't use them, but the reality is you need that sort of approach from the start. You need to know about encoding and what, I don't want to say danger, but what risks you're adopting by not passing things through that kind of filter. There was a question just came up in the chat. Do I have those velocity tokens? When they can be, although sometimes they use program level information like the UTM params that you all were talking about. So those would have to be overridden at the encoding token can be global, absolutely, but there still will be contributing velocity tokens that include program level information such as the UTMs and anything else that applies just in that program. So you really can't get away from program level, local, or inherited tokens. I don't think it's possible to have an instance that relies completely on global, but you want to make as many things global as possible. The great thing about inherited tokens for me is that, inherited and overridden tokens for me, is that they allow you to develop in one folder where you've overridden with the same names, you've overridden the global tokens, you've worked on your alpha, beta, even staging, QA versions of those tokens, and those are all in your own folders. And then the production ones are at the top level. And so the production ones get inherited by all the other programs that haven't overridden those for development purposes. So I think, like I said, you're always going to have at least some globals that are your prod, then you're going to have your development tokens. As you can hear, I get really into, I don't try to pretend that Marketo is a development environment, but I try to be as organized as possible. But yeah, so I mean, just to answer that other question, Warren, about advanced velocity stuff. Velocity is the only way to intersect multiple segmentations within the same content. So you can combine the person's segment in which segment they're in multiple different segmentations and decide on a final piece of content using velocity. Is this something that you can't do just using dynamic content on a single area, in an email or on at that built-in level, you're just segmenting according to one segmentation. But if you want to segment your content based on multiple segmentations simultaneously, you need velocity. So there is just immense power. I've never really gotten too far into a Marketo instance without realizing, okay, this thing needs velocity, even something as simple as the copyright year token, right? In order to have the copyright year get updated on New Year's Eve at the right time in your time zone, you need a velocity token. There's no other way to do that. So that's kind of why I look at, there is no Marketo without velocity. It's just a question of, how deep you want to go.
Sandy, can I ask about your methodology on this? And it kind of parallels what we were talking about with nurture programs, right? You don't necessarily just do that all in the UI. Maybe you do that outside of that. And I think back to like college and computer science, and they'd have these waterfall methodology where you'd do interviews, you'd write pseudocode, you'd do a data model, you'd do it. How formalized do you get, or would you recommend people that are getting into this? Like, I think your methodology with your experience level is probably different than your average Joe, but, would you recommend kind of pseudocoding out something before you kind of write it in velocity, or how would you recommend people get into that?
I absolutely do. That is a great question. And it kind of gets back to my whole XY thing that I was harping on a few minutes ago, because sometimes someone will post code in the Marketo community and say, like, this code isn't working. And I go, stop. What are you trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish? I can't code that literally doesn't. This is a tautology for anyone on the call, Adrian, Elliott, and so on, who's worked in software. If the code doesn't compile, like literally has a fatal error, you can't really, as a third party, you can't troubleshoot it. The first party might still know what they were trying to do, so they can troubleshoot it, but you can't show it to a third party and say, why doesn't this work? Like, I don't know, it's a fatal error. So absolutely sketching things out. But it's a catch-22. You learn after you do this kind of thing for long enough that I did really stupid things when I was starting out, really dumb things. And even now, it's almost like, regressing to childhood, if you will. Sometimes I do something so dumb with version control, I do a copy and paste over my production code, like instead of taking a copy of the last working one and then I screwed up. So it's like your adherence to these principles is dictated by when how often you fail to follow your own rules, right? Like you'll never always follow your own rules. That's going to be the case. But at least you want to make sure you're not like a pretender. You don't want to go out there and tell people I do everything the right way and secretly do almost everything the wrong way. But I don't know. That was a broad statement. But yeah, you categorically you need to be able to express what you want your code to do in some form of pseudocode, bullet point, flowchart, anything like that. If you can't do that, then you're really just guessing, frankly.
Yeah.
And so I absolutely encourage it. I wish we had the ability to teach people that, because as I said, you often don't learn that until you've already learned the wrong way. It's just so hard. If I can just say one more thing. The other day, someone on the committee asked a question, and they had said they had done this classic thing where they did, like, the name of the variable was string, just string. I said to my girlfriend, actually, I said to the person, why would you call it that? You know, you newbie. I didn't say it that meanly, but I said, you know, let's use your descriptive name. If it's your list of upcoming doctor's appointments, then the name of the variable is upcoming doctor's appointments, maybe capital, you know, D, capital A. It's not string. But when I went out into my living room later, I was like, I remember there were, quote, programming books. I'm dating myself here. Well, there still are books, but there were books when programming first became available to the masses. Let's say, you know, the Visual Basic 6.0 days, if people remember that. People were around then. That was when, like, you know, there were coders breaking out, right? PHP became available to the masses and so on. There were actual instruction manuals that did that thing that we consider the greatest sin of all uninformative coding, bad commenting, bad variable names. So, you know, who are you going to point a finger at if the real problem is people who were trying to teach, who taught people the wrong thing? I really went off there, but it really has been on my mind recently. It's like, who am I to tell people not to use, you know, generic variable names when there have been people, you know, there's a corpus of probably hundreds of millions of lines of code out there doing that, written by professional programmers from the days before we did things we remembered to be like the real programmers from the 2 decades before, who would never have done that. Like the people in the, you know, 60s, 70s, 80s would never have done that. 90s and 2000s, we just ran roughshod over all the great, you know, the efficient coding techniques. And so I'd like to return people to those things, but it's tough. It's marketing, you know, you get called in to do something just in time, so you copy and paste some bad code, or even it's your own code. And like I said, that's when you screw up. It's because the deadlines we're under. Yeah. And that's exactly when I defy my own rules, is when someone says, we need a point in time fix. I go, I'll just change the production velocity token, and I'll copy it out later, and I'll fork it back to my alpha and my beta token. And guess what? I do that 9 out of 10 times. But 1 out of 10 times, I leave things out of sync, because you should never, you know, you break your own rule. So.
Yeah, no, I think what I find is interesting actually is you have the capability to do all these extra things that they, you know, I'm thinking back to like using assembler back in the day, and you know, putting in a comment really wasn't a function or a functionality to be able to do that.
Right.
We are running out of time here. You know, Warren, do we have any other questions that before we kind of move into here? Because I want to respect everybody's calendars and clocks, right?
No, I think we're good on. I mean, I couldn't help myself but ask, as a person that didn't study any code. I know, Sanford, you've got a background in web development, and I noticed there's a couple on this call that have a background in web development as well. Like, what's your perspective on someone who's got a marketing background? They've approached a Marketo instance. They would like to push their knowledge more. Like, where would they start? Would you say be more versatile, or, as you said previously on, I think, other calls, you said maybe study the API and find out what it does to come up with kind of creative, like, things you can do there? What's your perception there on starting off? Because you've described a number of different things, at least from my perspective, I haven't been exposed to in some of those basic books. I'm just kind of testing and learning and breaking.
Well, I often say, and really it goes into the ether because I never formalize it in like a blog or anything, that people should learn text encoding, HTML encoding, the difference between, you know, Unicode and URL encoding and HTML encoding, and the ways that an email actually gets encoded when it gets put on the wire before they start trying to learn code. I know that's kind of a hopeless task because everyone wants to jump in and write the code and make these really cool emails with the multi-segmentations and all that stuff. It's hard to start from scratch, because it feels like you're going to school. It really is, and that's kind of the difficulty is we get accustomed to coding at work and thinking we're going to jump into making our bosses happy, you know, and the first thing you're going to do is probably make your boss go, what are you doing there? And you have to say, I'm learning to do this better so I can blow your mind later, you know.
Yes.
I don't know where I'm going with that, but that's so where would I say someone should start? Well, just to be clear, I do have a background now in web development, but my first background in coding was not web development, but systems development, which is actually much better for this kind of thing, not UIs, nothing having to do with the, you know, the visual side of things, but building, yes, this is why I kind of have an advantage, building like SMTP servers, building the stuff that passes, you know, data under the hood where you never see it. So you can't get distracted by the shiny stuff if there's no shiny stuff. And that's kind of the way I look at Velocity, and what's really cool is a great language to learn. Instead of learning JavaScript, which is always going to distract you with the shiny stuff of making cool-looking web pages and interactions, Velocity can't, as we know, it can't do that. It just assembles emails. So it is a great place to start to learn those building blocks of encoding and like what data, you know, difference between a string and an integer and a, you know, date time type and whatever, all that kind of stuff. You can do it in an isolated environment, and I think, yeah, this is my closing statement for today. Like, start with Velocity, start with, you know, basic concepts of data and text, and don't get distracted by, you know, the UI stuff. But big task.
Yeah. Thank you for that, and thank you everybody for all of your contributions today. We, you know, we could talk about this for a long time. I think you can see the passion that everybody has for this.
Yeah, this is why we never have it long enough in the half hour of EMA, right? It's like, yeah.
I always miss that. I always, you know, every time it's over, it's. But wait, and
right. Then Inga's like, well, it's no, 0-0 on the clock. We're done.
That's right. Yeah.
Because if we let it creep, then it's like we had a 45-minute schedule, and that's not right. So I agree with that, but.
So I'm going to pivot to next month. Just there's a quick group of this. One last event that so you'll see there's a bunch of different events. Trent, you've got a holiday hour. You know, December is kind of an interesting month because, you know, really the last half of the month everybody's on vacation and business doesn't happen there. Charlotte in our area here, you know, brand new or I guess a rebooted mug. And they're going to be doing a session basically just talking about sales engagement. And then our last session here for the Marketo User Group Roundup for the year, we have a special treat for you guys. We appreciate everybody kind of being here for the year. And so we're going to do a special holiday edition. And we've asked Kelsey Bork, who is actually, you know, the Adobe lead for all of the Marketo User Group programs, to sit in on this one. And then also, you know, marquee names like Brooke Bartos and Chelsea Kiko are going to join us. And obviously, if anybody on the panel wants to come in and sit on this one as well too. We normally look back on the past month worth of content. We're going to look back on the entire year of 2020, the giant fiasco that it was. And but from a Marketo User Group perspective, a lot of really great content that really helped, you know, where the world around us might be kind of a crazy place. At least we can go back to these user groups and participate in them and have a kind of a good sense of community there. So that's how we want to end off the year, Monday, December 14th. We hope you'll join us. It's only in 2 weeks at 12:30. And so that'll be our last session for the year. And then we'll kick off into January too. We're already working on getting panelists for a January session and really keep going into 2021 with the Marketo User Group content and expanding that out. So if you missed anything, you can watch that on YouTube and come back to the YouTube channel. And in the meantime, thank you everybody for all of your participation and your attendance at this. And we look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks for everybody that's on the call. Thanks again.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks for inviting me, and appreciate everyone listening there.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
Trent. Thanks, Sanford.
Cheers.